It's a proud moment to stand here today. This was a private member's bill that I brought in, and with the able effort and support of my colleague from Ynys-Môn, who helped to get it over the line. It's a joyous day because there's two things I'm absolutely passionate about. One is about fairness, and the other one is Watford. And in Watford, we have some fantastic hospitality locations and cafes and restaurants, from Jamaica Blue to Flourish Bakery, the Beach House to the Tudor Arms, Sun Sports to the Badger Pub, Rhubarb Cafe, the Random Cafe, Casio Lounge, and so many more. I'd love you all to visit as often as you can, because you would get to see delights you would get nowhere else in the world. But the reason why I list all of those is because in each one of those organisations, in each hospitality organisation, in each cafe, each restaurant, there are people who run the business, but there's also many, many staff who work in the business. And since talking about this tips bill way back when I originally tried to bring it in with a presentation bill that didn't quite make it through, and then because I have a routine of never giving up, I managed to then get a private member's bill through luck, and then get this through very much to the with thanks to the government, and especially the Minister on the front bench, who is doing incredible work in his team. But the reason why it was so important to me is because, especially during the pandemic, I would go and meet these organisations and I would chat to staff, and they were all consistent in their concerns about whether they'll get to keep tips, because there was a big shift at that time from people giving cash to somebody individually to moving to this world where cash isn't so common. And I don't think that's necessarily a good place to be, but that's the way the world's moved. And far more people now will pay a tip on a credit card at the end of a meal or at the end of a cafe. And I think every single one of us have said the same question at the end of that, when we've made that payment and when we give the tip, is, will you get this? And I think this is what this bill will help resolve. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Most grateful to the Honourable Gentleman and congratulate him on this superb effort in getting this bill through. It really is a wonderful thing to have done, and I support the principles behind it. I'm just slightly puzzled, however, by one aspect of it, which is that should a restaurateur or bar owner not be charging the correct price for the service, without any tip, without any service, without any add-on to it, and should he not be paying his workers a fair wage for the job they're doing, again, without any tips or service or other things? Surely his bill will set in stone a practice which actually some of us don't like that. I don't like tips very much. I'd much rather pay a fair price to the restaurateur and a fair price to the person who works for them.
Well, the Honourable Gentleman makes an incredibly important point, and actually it's at the heart of this, is that the fairness isn't just to the workers, it's to the businesses as well. Because the truth is, most businesses do the right thing. They pay a decent salary. There was I believe that the Minister can correct me on this, the legislation brought through a while ago which meant that tips can't form part of a salary, so they should be paying a decent wage. But the truth is, it's anti-competitive what some of these organisations are doing when they're doing the wrong thing. Because what they're doing is they're making profit off the backs of their workers by keeping their tips, and therefore they're making more profit off the back of their of their wages, or rather their tips, sorry. They're taking money out of the tips, and then the businesses that are doing the right thing and giving 100% of the tips to the staff are less competitive. So actually this is far fairer to the businesses, to the majority of businesses who do the right thing, and far fairer to the workers and to the customers who think that their money's going to them already and didn't quite realise that a percentage was being taken, or all of it in some instances. So what will this bill do? Building on that point, well, it will ensure fairness, and I think that's the key word that we should all take from this bill and this debate today. It will ensure all tips are paid to staff. That's 100% of the tips. It will include agency staff as well, which I know when originally talking about this bill, there was a concern from some thinking there might be a two-tier system for people who work. But also it will make sure there's a policy in place, a code of practice, which will make sure that businesses know where, ensure their staff know where they stand, and businesses will be able to be clear to everyone who works for them how the tipping practice will work. I won't go through the full list because the Minister did an excellent job of listing that earlier. But I think what's so important with this is that it's been a journey. I say about the fact it was my private member's bill and working with the Honourable Member from Ynys-Môn, but actually, as with all journeys, they started much earlier than I began the trek. And the reality is this began in many ways thanks to the fantastic work of the member from Bromsgrove, who, as Secretary of State back then, put into work the approach to look as a government into how we could make sure tipping was fair. And really this is built on the shoulders of giants. So there's been many members that I won't list now who've been involved in making sure that this bill came to fruition, but also many organisations as well. So I'd just like to thank some of those. UK Hospitality, especially Kate Nichols, who's done a fantastic job. The Nighttime Economy Industry Association has done brilliant work. GMB, you know, not often from these benches do we talk positively about unions, but, you know, fantastic work. ACAS has been mentioned as well. But lots of businesses and employers and employees who've really pushed for this to come into fruition. I'd also really like to thank some government and former government members, in particular the member for Sutton and Cheam, who was incredibly supportive when I originally tried to bring this in as a presentation bill. At the time, we were going to make it part of the employment bill. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but many of the policies that were going to be included in that did happen through various other routes. The member for Loughborough, who was a fantastic supporter and able minister, and of course the current minister and his team. And I would like to, through him, because he's been absolutely excellent in making sure that this is pushed forward, through him help his team, because some of them were my team in my short time as a minister, and I knew the passion they had to make sure that we got this right. And as mentioned, I very briefly had a time as a minister, and during that time I had to hand over this precious baby of mine, the TIPS bill, to a colleague to make sure we could keep it moving forward through the House. And that's when I was able to speak to my colleague from Ennismore, because I know that she has an incredibly important industry of hospitality in her constituency, and I couldn't think of someone more able and more energetic to make sure we got that through. And through her work and the work with Lord Robertson, we made sure that this got through and we got royal assent. And in fact, a story many of you will not know is on the day that royal assent was given, I was very fortunate to meet the King that morning in Parliament. So I'm sure that's a rare one for a pub quiz somewhere in the future. But the other person that I would like to give a huge thanks to is the lady who very rarely gets a mention in here, but is behind so many of these incredibly important bills, which is the MP for Castle Point, who does an incredible job giving us guidance as MPs how to navigate the very complex system of getting a bill through Parliament, but also to be able to give us confidence that it's possible. And she made sure that not just on this bill, but many others that I've been involved in different ways, flexible working, maternity care, leave, many others have got through and also gone on this incredibly important journey. So just to sum up, I think there's several things I just want to say. One is that this bill will help, I believe, around 2 million hospitality workers across the UK. That's an incredible number. But when I've spoken about this around the House, when I've spoken about it into my constituents in Watford, there's so many people, more than that, who will talk about the importance of this bill. Customers who want to make sure the money that they're giving, that they've worked hard for, as a thank you, gets to the people who they're giving it to. Colleagues who have family members who work as waiters or waitresses or work in bars, who will make sure that they get the money that there's been gifted to them. But also many colleagues have spoken to me and talked about their experiences when they were at university or when they were younger, who've also worked in hospitality. And I think what it showed to me is the important role that the hospitality sector has for our society, because actually it's often an apprentice approach for many of us into our careers. We learn a lot about our culture, about our society, about people, about our community through hospitality, and that's why in Watford I've been so passionate about trying to save our nighttime economy, but also across the UK. And this is slightly off point, but I think that also includes the need to make sure we protect the nighttime economy for music venues, because I think music venues are at the heart of much of what we've seen as a society in the UK, and I have a fear that that might be something that's damaged in the future. Hopefully this bill may play a small part in helping that. It's also, as I said, about fairness. There is no such thing in society that you can legislate for around fairness. It's a gut feel, but fairness is absolutely at the heart of what it is to be British. We believe in fairness in all parts of our society, and whilst this is legislation, at the heart of it, it goes back to the point that when you give money as a gift to somebody else, you expect them to get it, and that's what this bill will do, and I'm very grateful to the government for making sure that happens. I have a couple of points just related to this which I'd just like to raise with the Minister to make sure these are covered moving forward. One is about communications. Obviously, workers need to know their rights, and we need to make sure before October that there's a communication strategy so that they know what they've got rights to and how to access those and what they cover, but also to businesses to make sure that they know that this isn't going to be a burden. I recall during the early stages of being very, very mindful that we need to make sure this isn't a burden and more red tape to businesses. And I think the majority of businesses get that and they understand it. Those who are doing the wrong thing will no doubt kick up a fuss, and I'm sure we will probably hear over the coming weeks and months businesses trying to get around these regulations by forming new practices. I hope as a government we'll clamp down on those, we'll name and shame them, and I certainly will be very happy to do that to make sure fairness again is at the heart of this. And also I think there's a real role here about making sure that we're supporting as best that we can as a government the hospitality sector as a whole. It provides such an important part of our communities. It's at the heart of every village, every town, every city. Hospitality is often the reason why people come to visit. It's often the first port of call for a job, for a career, but it also provides such an important role around entertainment and culture. There's no other industry, I think, that has such an important broad role, and that's why I want to make sure we do that. So thank you to the government, thank you to the Minister, thank you to all colleagues across the House who've been incredibly supportive, thanks to the member for Ynys-Môn, but also, can I finally say, a huge thank you to my constituents in Watford. If they hadn't put me here, this bill might not be going through today. So thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
SNP spokesman.